The Notorious B.I.G. is one of the most famous stories in hip-hop history. His music helped define the sound of the 1990s. His voice, his storytelling, and his larger-than-life personality turned him into a legend before he even turned 25. But behind the fame, the hit songs, and the platinum records, there was another story. A much more complicated one. That story was known best by the person who raised him. His mother, Voletta Wallace. For decades, she protected her son's legacy. Whenever people talked about the rumors, the violence, or the controversy surrounding his death, she spoke carefully. She defended him. She focused on the good parts of his life. The talent, the success, the impact he had on music. But as the years passed, something changed. Time has a way of making people look back differently, especially when they have spent decades carrying grief. Before her death on February 21, 2025, Voletta Wallace spoke more openly about her son than she ever had before. In interviews and conversations near the end of her life, she talked about things that had stayed buried for years. She talked about Christopher Wallace, the boy she raised in Brooklyn. She talked about the choices he made as a teenager. She talked about the dangerous people who came into his life once fame arrived. And she talked about the night he was murdered in Los Angeles in 1997, a crime that still has never been solved. For years, fans only saw the legend. But Voletta Wallace saw the whole story. The brilliant kid, the troubled teenager, the rising superstar, and the young man whose life ended far too soon. This is the story of the Notorious B.I.G., told through the life he lived and through the memories of the woman who knew him best. Christopher George Lador Wallace was born on May 21, 1972, in Brooklyn, New York. The neighborhood was Bedford-Stuyvesant, often called Bed-Stuy by the people who lived there. In the 1970s and 1980s, Bed-Stuy had a reputation. It was a tough place to grow up. Crime was high, money was tight, and many families struggled just to get by. Christopher's mother, Voletta Wallace, had come to the United States from Jamaica. She worked as a preschool teacher and believed strongly in discipline, education, and hard work. She raised Christopher mostly on her own. His father, George Lador, was also from Jamaica, but he left the family when Christopher was still very young. After that, it was just Voletta and her son living together in a small apartment in Brooklyn. Voletta worked long hours to support them, teaching young children during the day, making sure bills were paid, and trying to give her son the kind of life she believed he deserved. From the beginning, Christopher stood out. He was a big kid. Even when he was young, people noticed his size and his deep voice. But he was also smart. Teachers often said he had strong reading and writing skills. He could absorb information quickly. At home, Voletta pushed him to focus on school. Education mattered to her. She had come to America believing that learning was the way to build a better future. She expected the same commitment from her son. Christopher often did well in class. But outside the classroom, Brooklyn was teaching him different lessons. The streets had their own culture. Kids learned quickly how to survive, how to talk, how to earn respect, and sometimes how to make money in ways that had nothing to do with school. Still, when Christopher was younger, music was already becoming part of his life. He loved listening to hip-hop records. Artists like Run DMC, LL Cool J, and Big Daddy Kane were dominating the sound of New York during the 1980s. Christopher listened carefully to how they rapped. The rhythm, the wordplay, the storytelling. Even as a teenager, he had a gift for remembering lyrics and repeating them almost perfectly. Friends later said he could stand on a street corner and rap for long stretches without stopping, making people laugh with his clever lines and smooth delivery. At home, though, Voletta saw a different side of him. To her, he was still Christopher, the boy who ate dinner at the kitchen table and sometimes complained about schoolwork. She knew he had a sharp mind. What she didn't know yet was how much influence the streets would eventually have on his life. During his early teenage years, Christopher attended the George Westinghouse Career and Technical Education High School. It was a large school, and many future hip-hop artists would pass through its hallways around the same time. Students remembered Christopher as funny and confident. He could make people laugh easily, but he also carried himself with a kind of quiet authority. When he spoke, people listened, and when he started rapping, people really paid attention. Even then, something about his voice felt different. It was deep, calm, and controlled. The kind of voice that could tell a story in a way that made people picture everything happening in their heads. But outside school, Brooklyn was changing him. By the time he reached his mid-teens, Christopher had begun spending more time on the streets than his mother realized. Valletta believed her son was still focused on school. In reality, another world was beginning to open up around him. And once that door opened, it would slowly pull him away from the life his mother had hoped for. By the late 1980s, Brooklyn had become one of the centers of hip-hop culture. Music was everywhere, blasting from car speakers, playing in neighborhood parks, and echoing from apartment windows. But hip-hop wasn't the only thing shaping the streets. The crack cocaine epidemic had hit New York hard. Entire neighborhoods were dealing with violence, drugs, and fast money that seemed impossible for many young people to ignore. Christopher Wallace was still a teenager when he began seeing that world up close. At first, it started with small things. Spending time with older kids, watching how money moved on the street, listening to conversations about deals, territory, and survival. For many teenagers growing up in neighborhoods like Bed-Stuy, the choices often felt limited. School could lead somewhere someday, but the streets offered money immediately. Christopher was smart enough to understand both worlds. And eventually, he started stepping deeper into the street life. He began selling drugs as a teenager. At first, his mother didn't know. Valletta Wallace believed he was still going to school and staying on track. But over time, the signs became harder to ignore. Christopher began spending more time outside the house. He kept different hours. Sometimes he had money that his mother couldn't explain. When she asked questions, he often gave vague answers. Like many parents, she wanted to believe her son was doing the right thing. But the truth was starting to slip through the cracks. Eventually, Christopher dropped out of high school. For Valletta, this was a major turning point. She had worked hard her entire life to give him opportunities, and now she saw him drifting further away from the future she had imagined. Later in life, she would talk about how painful that moment was. She knew her son was intelligent. She knew he had potential. But the streets had started to take control. Christopher's reputation in the neighborhood was growing. He was known not just as a big guy with a deep voice, but also as someone who understood how to move through the street economy. At the same time, music never completely left his life. Even while dealing drugs, he kept rapping. Friends remembered him freestyling in stairwells, on street corners, and at neighborhood gatherings. His rhymes were detailed, often telling stories about the exact world he was living in. That raw honesty would later become one of the defining parts of his music. He didn't rap about fantasy. He rapped about the reality he saw every day. Eventually, his street activities led to serious trouble. Christopher was arrested more than once during those years. One arrest in particular would leave a strong impact on both him and his mother. When Valletta found out her son had been arrested for drug dealing, the shock hit her hard. It forced her to confront the reality that the boy she had raised was living a dangerous double life. Years later, she spoke openly about that period. She admitted that she had not always known what Christopher was doing. She also admitted that once she realized how deep he had gone into that world, she felt powerless to pull him back. Still, one thing remained clear. Christopher Wallace had a talent that people around him couldn't ignore. Even among friends who were deeply involved in street life, his ability to rap stood out. People began telling him the same thing again and again. "You're too good to stay in this." Eventually, those words would reach the right ears. And when they did, Christopher Wallace would begin transforming into the artist the world would soon know as the Notorious B.I.G. By the early 1990s, Christopher Wallace was living two very different lives. On one side, he was still connected to the streets of Brooklyn. The fast money, the late nights, and the constant tension that came with it were part of his everyday routine. But on the other side, something else was happening. His reputation as a rapper was growing. In neighborhoods around Bedford-Stuyvesant, people had started talking about the big guy with the deep voice who could rap for minutes without stopping. Friends would gather around him in stairwells, on sidewalks, or in apartment hallways just to hear what he would say next. Christopher didn't write most of his rhymes down. He kept them in his head. He would memorize long verses and deliver them with a calm confidence that made people stop and listen. It was during this time that he began using the name the Notorious B.I.G. The name came from his size and his personality. Christopher was already a big man physically, but the nickname also reflected the way he carried himself. He had presence. When he walked into a room, people noticed. At first, his music spread through simple cassette tapes. Local DJs and friends helped record rough demo tracks. These tapes started circulating through New York's underground hip-hop scene. One of those demo tapes would eventually change everything. The tape found its way to a young music executive named Sean Combs. At the time, Combs was working in the music industry and trying to build his own label. He had a reputation for spotting talent early, and when he heard Christopher's voice, he immediately knew something was different. The voice stood out first. It was deep and slow, almost relaxed, but every word felt sharp and clear. Then there was the storytelling. Christopher wasn't just rhyming random lines. He was describing real situations. The streets, the struggles, and the complicated choices people had to make. Combs decided he needed to meet him. When the two finally connected, the chemistry was obvious. Combs believed Christopher could become a star if he was given the right platform. Soon after, Christopher signed with Bad Boy Records, the label Combs was building. For the first time, music wasn't just something Christopher did on the streets. It became his career. Back in Brooklyn, Violetta Wallace started hearing more about what her son was doing. She knew he had always loved music, but she hadn't fully realized how serious he was about it. At first, she wasn't sure what to think. Hip-hop was still new at the time, and many parents didn't see it as a stable profession. But when she began hearing his recordings, something surprised her. Her son had real talent. The same storytelling ability she had noticed when he was younger had turned into something powerful. Christopher was no longer just rapping for friends on street corners. He was now recording music that would soon reach millions of people. In 1994, everything changed. That year, the Notorious B.I.G. released his first major album, Ready to Die. The title itself reflected the life he had been living. Many of the songs described the harsh realities of growing up in Brooklyn, the pressure of street life, and the mental struggles that came with it. But the album also showed something else. Honesty. Christopher wasn't pretending to be something he wasn't. His lyrics felt personal, almost like someone sitting down and telling their life story. One of the songs that changed everything was Juicy. The track told the story of his rise from poverty to success. It talked about the days when he couldn't afford basic things and the moment when his music finally started paying off. Listeners connected with it immediately. Radio stations began playing the song constantly. Hip-hop fans across the country started paying attention to the big rapper from Brooklyn with the unforgettable voice. Within months, Biggie had gone from a local rapper to a national star. Concerts got bigger. Interviews started coming in. Money began flowing in a way Christopher had never experienced before. For Violetta Wallace, watching this transformation was emotional. For years, she had worried about her son being lost to the streets. Now she was seeing him on television, hearing his voice on the radio, and watching people celebrate his talent. But fame also brought pressure. The music industry moved fast. There were constant appearances, recording sessions, business meetings, and tours. Christopher suddenly had an entire team around him. Managers, producers, bodyguards, friends, and new people who seemed to appear everywhere he went. Some of those people genuinely believed in him. Others were simply attracted to the success that surrounded him. Even as his fame grew, Christopher continued writing lyrics about the life he had lived. That authenticity helped his music stand out in a crowded hip-hop scene. Many fans believed Ready to Die was one of the most honest albums ever recorded. But while the world saw the success, the pressure behind the scenes was beginning to grow. And the people surrounding Biggie were becoming just as important as the music itself. By the mid-1990s, the Notorious B.I.G. had become one of the biggest names in hip-hop. His music dominated radio stations. His videos appeared constantly on television. Fans across the country knew his voice instantly. But fame didn't simplify his life. In many ways, it made things more complicated. As Biggie's success grew, so did the number of people around him. Some were childhood friends who had known him long before the fame arrived. Others were industry figures who now wanted to work with one of the most popular rappers in the world. Among the most important relationships in his life during this time was his marriage to Faith Evans. The two met while both were working under the Bad Boy music label. Their connection was fast and intense. Not long after meeting, they decided to get married. For a while, their relationship seemed strong. But life inside the music industry can move at a chaotic pace. Tours, recording sessions, interviews, and long periods away from home created stress. Rumors also began spreading in the media. Stories about arguments, infidelity, and tension started appearing in magazines and on television programs. For celebrities in the 1990s, privacy was becoming harder and harder to maintain. Meanwhile, Biggie's music continued to grow more influential. Artists across the country began studying his style, the slow delivery, the detailed storytelling, and the confidence in his voice. But behind the scenes, the atmosphere around him was becoming tense. Competition in hip-hop was intense, and rivalries between artists were beginning to form. One of the most serious rivalries would involve Tupac Shakur. At first, the two had mutual respect. They had met earlier in their careers and even spent time together in the studio. But misunderstandings, rumors, and outside influences slowly pushed them apart. Soon, the tension between East Coast and West Coast hip-hop artists began dominating headlines. Fans started choosing sides. Music magazines wrote about the conflict constantly. And suddenly, the rivalry between Biggie and Tupac was being treated like a battle between two entire coasts of the country. Back in Brooklyn, Violetta Wallace watched these developments with concern. She knew fame brought attention, but the level of hostility building around the hip-hop world felt dangerous. The arguments were no longer just about music. They were becoming personal, and the tension surrounding her son was about to grow much more serious. By 1995, the hip-hop world had become deeply divided. What started as competition between artists slowly turned into something much bigger. The media began framing rap music as a battle between two regions, the East Coast and the West Coast. On the East Coast, the Notorious B.I.G. was one of the biggest stars. On the West Coast, Tupac Shakur had become a powerful voice with millions of fans. At one time, the two men had actually respected each other. Earlier in their careers, they had crossed paths several times. Tupac even offered advice to Biggie when he was still rising in the industry. But everything changed after a violent incident in 1994. Tupac was shot during a robbery inside a New York recording studio. After the shooting, he publicly suggested that people in the East Coast rap scene might have known about the attack before it happened. Some of his comments seemed to point toward Biggie and Sean Combs. Biggie denied any involvement. Still, the accusation spread quickly through magazines, radio stations, and interviews. Fans began choosing sides. Artists started releasing songs aimed at each other. What had once been a friendship between two talented rappers turned into one of the most famous rivalries in music history. The situation only became more intense when Tupac signed with Death Row Records, a powerful West Coast label run by Suge Knight. Death Row and Bad Boy Records soon became symbols of the larger conflict. Music videos, award shows, and interviews started carrying tension. Sometimes artists would openly insult each other during performances. Fans treated it like a war. But behind the scenes, people close to Biggie later said he didn't enjoy the conflict as much as the public believed. He understood how dangerous things could become when pride, money, and reputation mixed with street culture. Back in Brooklyn, Violetta Wallace was watching everything unfold. She saw the interviews. She read the headlines. And she started worrying that the music industry had created a situation that was spinning out of control. In September 1996, tragedy struck the hip-hop world. Tupac Shakur was shot in Las Vegas after attending a boxing match. 6 days later, he died from his injuries. His death shocked fans everywhere. But it also made the atmosphere inside the rap industry even more tense. Many people wondered if more violence would follow. Less than 6 months later, those fears became reality. On March 8, 1997, the Notorious B.I.G. was in Los Angeles promoting his upcoming album Life After Death. He had traveled to the city for a series of events during the Soul Train Music Awards weekend. That night, he attended a party at the Peterson Automotive Museum. The party was full of music industry figures, celebrities, and friends. It was meant to be a celebration. Shortly after midnight, the party ended and guests began leaving the building. Biggie left in a black SUV with members of his team following in other vehicles. The streets of Los Angeles were still busy with traffic. At one point, his vehicle stopped at a red light. Then a car pulled up beside them. Moments later, Gunshots rang out. The shooter fired multiple times through the window of Biggie's vehicle. The attack lasted only seconds before the car sped away. Biggie was rushed to the hospital. Doctors tried to save him, but the injuries were too severe. In the early hours of March 9, 1997, Christopher Wallace was pronounced dead. He was only 24 years old. News of the killing spread quickly across the country. Radio stations interrupted their programming. Television networks reported the story all day. Another major hip-hop star had been murdered. And just like Tupac's death, the crime raised more questions than answers. For Voletta Wallace, the news was devastating. Losing a child is one of the most painful experiences any parent can face. But losing a child in a violent, unsolved murder created an entirely different kind of grief. Christopher Wallace had become a global superstar, but to Voletta he was still her son. The boy she had raised in Brooklyn. The boy who used to sit at her kitchen table. In the years after his death, Voletta refused to let his legacy disappear. She worked to preserve his music and protect the story of his life. She helped manage his estate and supported projects that honored his career. But she also wanted something else. Justice. The investigation into Biggie's murder became complicated. Over the years, rumors began circulating about possible suspects. Some people believed gangs were involved. Others believed corrupt police officers might have had knowledge of the crime. Several lawsuits were filed over the years involving the city of Los Angeles and the police department. Lawyers and investigators tried to piece together what really happened that night in 1997. But despite all the attention, the case remained unsolved. For Voletta Wallace, that uncertainty never disappeared. She spent years speaking publicly about her hope that the truth would eventually come out. Even decades later, she continued asking the same question. Who killed her son? As the years passed, Voletta Wallace became one of the most respected voices protecting the legacy of the Notorious B.I.G. She attended tributes, participated in interviews, and spoke about the impact her son's music had on the world. But in her later years, she also began speaking more honestly about the difficult parts of his life. She acknowledged that Christopher had made serious mistakes when he was younger. His involvement in street life, the conflicts in the rap industry, and the dangerous people who surrounded him were all part of the story. She didn't try to hide those realities anymore. In interviews near the end of her life, she spoke openly about how fame had brought both opportunity and danger into her son's world. She also said something that caught many fans' attention. She believed that too many people in the music industry knew more about the events surrounding his death than they were willing to admit. For years, she had stayed careful about making accusations. But later in life, she became more direct. She suggested that the truth about what happened in Los Angeles in 1997 had never fully come out. And she believed someone, somewhere, still knew exactly who was responsible. On February 21, 2025, Voletta Wallace passed away. She had spent nearly 3 decades protecting her son's legacy and searching for answers about his murder. Even after all those years, the case remained unsolved. But one thing never changed. For millions of fans around the world, the Notorious B.I.G. remained one of the greatest voices hip-hop had ever produced. And for his mother, he was always Christopher, the Brooklyn boy she raised, whose life changed music forever.